Greetings to all the participants. Welcome to Anekdhara's 37th webinar. Today's theme is environmental crisis in urban spaces in India. South Asia is home to 9 out of world's 10 cities with worst pollution. This is disclosed by the 2023 report of the World Bank titled Striving for Clean Air, Pollution and Public Health in South Asia. The report also says that most of the Indian cities fail to meet the ambient air quality standards which have been set by the World Health Organization. In an article recently, which was written by the CEO of iForest, we learned from that saying that the Indian Ocean experiment conducted 25 years ago identified a thick arc of brown haze extending from Amritsar to Agartala, engulfing the Indo Gangetic Plain, which is called the Asian brown cloud, a 3 kilometer thick cloud. Our national capital, which is set in this arc, experiences air quality that ranges from poor to severe for almost 180 days in a year. Come winter, it gets worse. In the absence of wind and rain, the polluted cold air remains trapped. The reasons adduced for this phenomena range from emissions by vehicles to burning of fossil fuels. And they leave a death trail. It has been said that the ambient particulate matter pollution causes 1 out of 10 deaths. We are surely gasping for clean air. This is on one side of our cities. On the other, we have water crisis and indiscriminate urban expansion leading to flooding during monsoons. In July 2005, Mumbai was flooded. The disaster left nearly 1,000 dead. It also left scars of untold grief, of losses of homes and livelihoods. Similarly, in the 2015 Chennai floods, more than 500 were killed and over 1.8 million were displaced. Flooded cities, as urban planners say, are not just a result of rising waters, but of sinking priorities. These crises in urban spaces, which include hazardous air quality, poor sanitation, deficient drainage, encroachment of water bodies, etc., in the wake of increasing urban population, make our cities unlivable. Evidently, Indian cities are trapped among political apathy, marauding realtors, and systemic chaos. Is it all dismal or is there hope? How do we chart our course to building the city of tomorrow? The city of tomorrow, according to an urban planner, is a garden city where every building cleans the air and every street welcomes life. To dwell upon this theme, today we have a fabulous combination of speakers. One, Dr. Ramesh, who is most technically qualified, who has been at the forefront of policy formulation and execution on matters relating to climate diagnostics, climate change, and air quality management. And the other, Mr. Nityanand, who has been on the ground actively resisting wrong policy choices which lead to environmental crisis. We are indeed fortunate to have such eminent speakers with us. So, before we hand over, I would like to introduce Dr. KJ Ramesh. Dr. KJ Ramesh is the former Director General of Meteorology of the Indian Meteorological Department, Government of India, and at present is an adjunct professor of the National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore. Dr. Ramesh has a doctorate from IIT Delhi in monsoon dynamics and has specialized in numerical weather prediction, monsoon dynamics, and disaster mitigation modeling. He has made significant contributions to the development of real time cyclone hazard mitigation modeling systems, flood hazard mitigation modeling systems, long term hazard planning and management for cyclones, drought, and earthquakes. He has implemented a state of the art detection and warning system for weather and climate services. His contributions include building of science based systems for climate risk management, observing system networks for monitoring and detection of climate change, and air quality forecasting systems. He has been continuously engaged in activities in relation with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and has attended conferences and talks on climate change across the globe over the last 16 years. Several fellowships, distinctions, and awards were conferred upon him. He has published more than 48 research articles and reports on meteorology, disaster management, and climate change. He was an esteemed member of the Committee on Air Quality Management for National Capital Region. There is much more. I think I have given a glimpse of what Dr. Ramesh means to us and what he has accomplished. And before I hand over the floor to him, I would like to say that request all our participants to post their questions on the YouTube chat box, and we will take up these questions after both our speakers finish their address. Over to you, sir, Dr. Ramesh.
Thanks very much, Madhurity and your colleagues at Anekdhara. I'm very much pleased to be part of this webinar, and thanks very much for introducing me. And this is a wonderful platform to convey the truthful issues which are yet to be addressed in a holistic manner. So we only see the reports of cities and urban segments coming to a standstill quite often for various reasons. So incidentally, we should understand the basic system. So weather, water, climate, air quality, environment. All the five things are intimately interacting with each other on continuous basis. When air is clean, about 40-50 years before, our population was less, so we didn't have much problem of this continuous feedback and interaction changing each other, five systems of the urban segment. So we were not having much of the difficulty. They were well within the assimilative capacities of our ecosystems, where air, water, soil, all these things are part of our ecosystem, and livelihoods and resources available for us: water resource and groundwater resource. Food comes from agriculture, and all this when we were doing more of organic farming. Once we moved to chemical fertilizers and pesticides, so things started changing gradually. So let us see how this interaction, which has been there for centuries, is creating problem. And not only the pollutant increase, contamination of air degradation, air quality degradation is already there, but everybody is experiencing at the same time water quality and the groundwater quality degradation and the soil degradation, which is more important in the changing climate. So in the with the background of all existing problems which are human created in particular, and we have the problem of climate change. Of course, global warming and climate change is also caused by human activity, anthropogenic activities. There greenhouse gases are there. Now we talk about other gases emanating from our day-to-day actions beyond industrialization, which are harming our quality of life, and health crisis or health emergencies are created, at least in winter, in many parts of the country and South Asia in particular. So we talk about population increase is there. So that is one particular factor. But if you have learned to manage our urban governance in particular, because rural area is not affected even today that much as compared to the urban areas. But some peri-urban, semi-urban areas are affected, but by and large, it is an urban problem. So if you see from 1901 to 2011, where official census are available, so we have about 8,410 urban areas where urban local bodies are functional, from municipalities to corporations and mega corporations like Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore and Chennai, Ahmedabad. So here percentage of urban population gradually was increasing from 25 crores to 37 crores by 2011. So if you see that almost 36% of 36.6, almost roughly 37% of population, these are from World Bank. We didn't have census subsequently. From 2011 to uh, 2024, about 36% of the population are living in the urban areas. And if you go, how you can clearly see how urban population is increasing. So that is happening not only for employment, better employment opportunities, and because of industrialization and other livelihood opportunities increase in the urban areas, and it is equally important. The migration was driven for better education for children. So we should also, this factor we normally don't talk about. So that is also a reason, living their safe and comfortable rural life. Many families migrate to cities, not necessarily for the employment and other quality of life, but for the education of their children. So that is also important fact. We hardly talk about that reason for the migration. So if you see that from 25 to 2050, 2025 to 2050, almost 52% of the population, Indian population, will be in urban areas. So that is the sort of the way the things are improving. And this is one side, that is pressure is building on the amenities and facilities provided by the urban local bodies for the citizens of urban centers. So at the same time, if you see, there is another factor bringing in life expectancy of the people is also has increased because of better health and other access to other improved sanitation and other factors, developmental factors, which have contributed over the decades, 70, 75 years. So people not only increasing, so more number of people will be staying for longer decades. So if you see population density wise, it is, we have about 488 people per square kilometer, which is very, very high. Above 400 itself is considered as unmanageable density of population, but our national average itself is 488. So our constraints are so many, under which our means of providing um, management of urban environment, particularly dealing with sewage, solid waste, and the pollution coming from industrial sources, construction activities, road dust, vehicular pollution, industrial pollution, and they what are emitted are interacting with each other, and we have a secondary generation of toxic pollutants also. I'll briefly touch upon them. So they are making the quality of life further degraded. When toxicity adds to the pollution, you can imagine how much it will affect your lungs and other human life. So, resilience per se from the human body gets impacted significantly by virtue of all these activities going on surrounding us. So the population is growing, yes, that is one reason, but our ability for not able to manage the urban governance, reposition our urban governance with the increasing demands of water, air, uh, and other safe quality of life. See, we talk about public safety only in terms of transportation safety on roads, but now health has become very important factor of public safety and survival of the mankind, particularly Indian population, because we are very high density of people. So human activities have disturbed the equilibrium of the atmospheric environment, as I briefly been talking about, and it is changing the chemistry of the atmosphere because of secondary releases and the toxicity added apart from the direct emissions of the pollutants, different kinds of pollutants. Disposal of human industrial waste into rivers, land, air not only affect the atmosphere and climate, but also degrade the quality of fresh water as well as damage to the ecosystem. So, which is the important factor which we are able to see their impact despite our best efforts. Ganga is not getting cleaned despite our best of the IITs are part of this mechanism. Ganga and Yamuna remain like that, and small rivers, coastal waters, no need to talk about it. So we have been passing laws, several laws, particularly after 90, some major changes started happening in terms of compliance of the laws, in terms of controlling the pollutants and other steps taken. So we started seeing some drop at every 5-year period of the emission concentrations, but the satellite data confirms that subsequently at the same time by 2010, since 1990 or 1992. So you can say that our forest cover has increased. It may not be a dense forest, but seeing from the satellite, it is only a leaf area. So that way, some 7% increase in the green cover has been seen, and that helps in absorbing the greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and other uh, secondary emissions, reduces the global warming in a very, very incrementally infinitesimal way. But that is only the good thing happened, apart from several damaging things allowed to happen without a regulation putting on it. And single-use plastics has become another problem since 2019. We have put some regulations, but still a lot more got to be done. We have been seeing the microplastics even in deep ocean and open ocean waters. So that is another global issue, has become a global issue, not necessarily for India alone. So agriculture is getting affected. So we have been using a lot of water for agriculture, and at the same time, agriculture land is converted into for expansion of the urban landscapes, and that puts pressure on the food security, because land which is available for agriculture has been traditionally getting reduced. So we have at the same time multiple impacts like climate change, and we are seeing other factors, extreme impacts from heat waves, and as well as the urban floods, which has been mentioned in the introduction, and the epidemics from the vector-borne, waterborne diseases. They are again related to change of temperature and humidity, and airborne diseases are the third contributions because of the pollutants. So urban local governments need to be armed. So seeing this experience, now we have to make urban local governments with the technical inputs like climate, basic climate forecasts, weather extreme forecasts, and impact models. How these changing weather and climate anomalies will impact different components of the urban sector, air quality, water, environment, etc., and can make more informed choices to safeguard the communities and minimize the impacts for the future. So, if you talk about a thing, we always talk about sustainable development goals. So, those goals are directly related to how we manage our systems. If you see very clearly, India, so there are important indicators like reduced inequalities. So we are not working much, that is stagnant. But most importantly, negative is sustainable cities and communities. So there it is all negative. Our efforts are shown as this is 2024 SDG index. It is negative. Another negative is the climate action. Whatever climate action we are taking for reducing the impacts of climate change, adaptation or mitigation you talk about. So there we are not performing that well. And issues like life on the land is stagnant, efforts are stagnant, and other factors which are not so significant. If you see the overall index out of 167 countries, we stand at 109th position on SDGs. We have about 17 SDG goals. So we are not performing that well in terms of SDGs, which has comprehensive actions we take across the country, and then different indicators are there, and that's how we stand on that. So another important factor is the when we see how much rain we get, increasing temperatures, whatever rain we get is getting evaporated. So we might have the problem of water shortage. But at the global scale, if you see Asia, so we have more precipitation than the evaporation, unlike the other parts of Africa and South America. So this is a blessing we have from the nature. Because of this, global warming is not reducing the rainfall, but rainfall characteristics have changed. We are receiving the seasonal quantum of rains is very less number of rainy days. So short duration, high intensity precipitation has become the normal now. So although number of rainy days have reduced, our seasonal quantum has not reduced. So these are some of the changes which are happening. We don't know how to hold on to that high intensity, short duration precipitation, not allowing it to run off, increase our storage. This is what we have to learn on the water sector. And in terms of PM 2.5 from the satellite data, remote sensing data, two sources are available. So both the sources say that we have anomaly of so much 12 to 18 microgram per this is the anomaly of recent year. So we have much higher concentration of PM 2.5. So enabling early warning services is the one thing where early warning services not limited to weather and climate and heavy rain and heat wave, but we should also link early warning services to with the background circulation changes of the atmosphere to the local emissions of air quality and their interaction with the greenhouse gases. So this is and then interaction with environment, the waste we generate, solid waste, sewage, etc. It is a new early warning systems addressing up to the local scale ward level environmental management guidance has to emerge from the early warning systems now. So that's where we have to work because now next dimension is health. It affects the health, human health. So not only from air quality but vector-borne, waterborne, airborne diseases. So these are some of the new areas we should start working on. We are not working on those areas, although knowledge exists. So it doesn't end with the meteorological department to go up to the suburban scale level, ward level. and that has to happen with the partnership of urban local bodies. So if you see, there are environmental performance index apart from sustainable development goals. Although we did not accept the observations officially of 2024 report of EPI, but it has got about uh, uh, policy directives, 11 categories and faulty indicators, both on the environmental health, climate, environmental health, and ecosystem vitality. So these are all the important things apart beyond SDG. To protect our own urban population, we have to work on building these indicators, measuring these indicators in a quantitative manner beyond SDG. So to be say that we are working towards improving living conditions of our population. So if you see in this particular matrix, very interesting. So climate change is 30%, and health, environmental health is 25%, ecosystem vitality associated with biodiversity and habitat. Uh, this is air quality and climate change and mitigation. On all the things we are down. You have shown SDG indicators. So ecosystem cannot increase when these two factors are negative. So although we have not accepted this assessment of 2024 officially environment performance index, we are located at 176 position. Sorry, yes, thank you. We are located at 176 out of 180 countries. So this is another issue of grave concern. So it is a compounding crisis. So we have to work on so many dimensions, not only for climate change related regulations, environmental policy making regulations, particularly the waste management issues, water quality issues in urban areas, and associated toxicity that is getting generated. So at the global scale, you can see 2000, that's AR6 of United Nations from IPCC report, which is released in 2019. So you can clearly see this is a basket of global warming, total warming, and then there is a cooling by the whole basket of aerosols. So this is a greenhouse gases are warming on one side, and at the moment it is a blessing in disguise. All the pollutants are contributing to a cooling. So overall warming is offset by about 0.23 degrees. It is not a good thing, because this is contributing much more to our health apart from the global warming. It is incrementally at the moment reducing, although it doesn't mean that we should not work on minimizing. This is targeting reduction of all carbonaceous, non-carbonaceous aerosols becomes very important for human life and public safety in terms of health concerned, safety and resilience of the population itself. On one side, global warming says heat waves are increasing, and when 1 degree warming of temperature takes place, it adds, makes the atmosphere to hold about 7% of the water vapor extra. So it makes the warming, makes the atmosphere, 1 degree of the warming makes the atmosphere to hold 7% higher water vapor. So that when higher water vapor is there, so it has to form more clouds or bigger clouds. So bigger clouds will lead to the increased precipitation intensities. That's how we are seeing high intensity and short duration precipitation events, and number of rainy days are decreasing because of global warming on one side. So it is some sort of new normal of a climate variability driven by the global warming has been there. So if you see in terms of uh, uh, rain, so you get much more high intensity precipitation is about 4.8 times increase in the rainfall intensity is possible when 1 degree warming is there. So like that, we are already having a guidance from that. So we are in for high intensity precipitation, and monsoon rains are increasing. So we have indication that we have to learn to manage many things. Apart from in urban areas, heavy rainfall is one thing, and then heat wave is another one. And uh, when heat wave means higher temperatures makes atmosphere to hold more water vapor, so that leads to more rains in short duration. And apart from managing air quality and emissions, transportation, etc. So in urban areas, changes in land use, land cover, because semi-urban areas, peri-urban areas are merged into urban landscape. So change in land use, land cover is a significant factor to be taken into consideration. While doing that, how much um, uh, uh, possibilities for reduction of air quality, we are not targeting that. We are only working on expanding the city urban landscape. So that adds more solid waste generation, and we have serious issues on collection and management of solid waste. And the sewage, poor sanitation is the next factor. Apart from sewage, we have to we are working on minimizing the open defecation by sanitation program. But already whatever we have done, that is affecting surface and groundwater resources. So about the toxicity I just mentioned. So here we have to see PM2.5 and water vapor. So makes uh, the water molecules bigger by toxicity, hydrochloric acid, ammonia, PM2.5, sulfur dioxide, sulfate aerosols, all coming from industry, plastic burning, livestock, vehicles, will add ammonium chloride, and they become larger particles, and the smog is created apart from the fog and low visibility from directly from the pollutants. So we are this is a secondary generation. So toxicity comes from this particular factor, we hardly talk about it. But if you go to places where solid waste dumps are there in several parts of Delhi, whether it is eastern side or northern side or southern side of Delhi, so in surrounding areas you will see the effect of fog and smog mixing together. And I should mention that even during the COVID lockdown time, so these concentrations and generating ozone from the surface ozone has not reduced despite a reduction in PM2.5 transportation emissions, because everything was locked down. But that was the time we realized that this solid waste related um, um, toxicity generated by the interaction of pollutants released, secondary pollutants released from solid waste and the atmospheric chemistry is doing the more damage. So there are some calculations how much of the particulate matter comes from different parts of NCR districts. So these are some of the calculations. We get about 27.32% of the PM particulate matter. This is for one particular day, 25th uh, September 2022. So this percentage will change depending upon the human activities happening in different urban areas of the NCR. So now it may be crossing 30% clearly. So apart from local emissions, 30% of the emissions comes from other parts of the NCR. This is one particular factor. In that, biomass burning, stubble burning is about 0.01%. This is the September. So when you go to winter, it goes up to 12 to 15% biomass burning, because winds are coming from Punjab and Haryana, so they bring those stubble burning related pollutants towards Delhi. And at the same time, power plants which are operating in NCR and Punjab also emit sulfate aerosols. So there is a secondary interaction adding to the more transport of pollutants in winter, apart from the stubble burning alone. It's a very, very complex situation. And there is some decision support system which was built by the institutions of Ministry of Earth Sciences, which will say in about 40 different sectors contributing to the air quality AQI index in Delhi. So this is to regulate on a particular period of 2022. So if you say different construction and different factors, which are 40 activities that are happening in NCR region, so you can stop one of these depending upon to improve the AQI. But when AQI goes beyond 500, 600, 700, as we have been seeing, so nothing of these actions will help. But there is a mechanism to act on an objective basis for the Commission for Air Quality Management uh, to work on reducing, closing down some of the actions. We have something called graded response action plan, grade 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, but they are all only to get idea from the air quality forecasting how different sectors are contributing. So next factor briefly I touch upon. The heat wave is another factor which is affecting the urban areas, but with heat wave action plans developed in coordination with the local authorities and the India Meteorological Department heat wave alerts, significant reduction started happening in heat waves related mortalities, particularly after 2016. And these are some of the figures which are available. These are morbidities, and these are the mortalities. Significant impact has been there by 2019 itself. And states are working very closely when the air alerts are taken, where guidelines from the National Disaster Management Authorities is there for heat wave action plan. So those steps are taken by local authorities very well. And in terms of rainfall changes, you can see clearly decade of 1981 to 1990. These are the zones of heavy and extremely heavy rainfall. Extremely very heavy rainfall means more than 60 centimeters per day. So going up to more than 60 millimeter and above per day, 64 millimeters per day. So if you see by 91 to 2000, in next decade from 90 to 2000, you can see how many more number of days are having extreme rainfall. And by 2010, you can see further increase is there. So if you see from between 2011 to 2020, month-wise, June, July, August, September, so no month of monsoon is devoid of heavy rainfall events. And if you see last decade, 2012 to 2022, you take trend difference from the decades of 1982 to 2011. So 30-year anomaly of the recent decade, if you see, these are the areas rainfall has significantly increased. So this is the major concern in urban. We can know how many urban sectors are there. Out of 8,400, definitely 5,000 urban sectors will be falling in this zone of extreme rainfall, and they are statistically significant also. So, and if you go to heavy rainfall days, they are also increasing. Apart from the rainfall quantum, number of days of heavy rainfall are also increasing. And so these are the recent 10 years frequency is also increasing at very heavy rainfall category also. So if you go to state level, you can clearly see rainy days are increasing somewhere, rainy days are decreasing somewhere. This side, definitely they are increasing in, this is in Andhra Pradesh, and you can clearly see rainfall is increasing in several uh, districts. This is Andhra Pradesh. If you go to Telangana, so you can see rainy days are increasing, and the trend of rainfall is increasing also. Uh, and in terms of extreme events, if you see each district is characterized by multiple extreme events apart from air quality related impact. So we have to talk about disaster risk reduction, where somewhere heat wave, cold wave, flood is there, somewhere drought, heat, flood are there. Like that, every district has a combination of multiple hazards impacted. And over and above this, we have this is disaster risk. Climate risk is adding frequency of heavy rainfall events and heat waves intensity increase over and above the existing disaster state. And then air quality environment adds over and above these factors. And only on the vulnerability and um, uh, uh, disaster and climate perspective, if you see, second category is Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, third is Maharashtra, fourth is Karnataka. So you can, one is the Assam. So that has been the case, that is known to people, but this factor of most productive, economically contributing, GDP contributing states of South India are becoming more and more vulnerable, unlivable from the disaster management, disaster risk reduction, and climate climate risk management perspective. Beyond that, air quality, environment factors also had to be added over to this. And coming to small factor which I touch is the water availability from the decades of 1955 to decades of 2015. You can clearly see hardly any change in the water availability from the decades of 55 to this. So we don't have overall water availability from the rivers across the country. And then reassessment of water availability has been done from 1955 to 2015. On the other hand, heat waves are increasing, rainfall intensities are increasing, trends are increasing, and this is the warming. And 2015 and air quality, environmental related loading on urban areas are there, with the background of increasing population, shortage of access, inability to provide access of clean water, clean air, and fertile soil is the challenge. And 2015 in the background, 2023 has been, 2024 in particular has been above 1.5-degree warming till October 2024. So this is another factor. We thought that after 2030 we will reach this 1.5-degree, but now itself we have touched, and the impacts have become much more on the ground. So this is 2024. If you see, out of 255 days till September 2024, right from January, out of 274 days, 255 days have recorded one extreme event or the other in some part of the country or the other. So human deaths are there. So far, about 3,200 crop area affected, 3.2 million hectares is affected, and then households are damaged, and animal deaths are there. So asset loss is also started happening. Uh, Impact to public safety is one thing. We are taking some steps to provide getting relief from heat waves and extreme rain, thunderstorm, lightning, etc. But the asset loss is significant at the household level. So this definitely affects per capita GDP, which has to be also addressed. If you see different parts, it is having the breakup from different parts of the country. So warming is not uniform. You have seen the global warming 1.5-degree, but country, if you see, different states are experiencing different intensities of warming. You can imagine 1-degree warming will make 7%, 6.7% of higher water vapor holding capacity to the atmosphere. Then 2 to 3 degrees means you can imagine 18 to 20% water vapor holding of the atmosphere overlying Arunachal Pradesh, Assam. In those months makes the cloudburst and flash floods happening in these hill states. So Northeast India, Himachal, Uttarakhand, we are seeing already warming is much higher than the global warming. So these are all some of the factors in urban areas. Urban development is also adding, apart from the global warming, our own air conditions, urban heat island effect. We call about different cities contributing to different amounts of incremental addition warming over and above whatever we talked about. And these are some of the things. Rainfall has increased because of urban heat island effect. Downstream areas, peri-urban areas, rural areas are receiving higher rainfall apart from the increased precipitation in the urban area. This is a new study coming. So we thought that urban heat island effects increase thunderstorms, lightning, heavy rainfall over the urban areas because urban heat island effect traditionally warming the urban atmosphere, but downstream of the urban atmosphere also receives higher precipitation. So this is some new impacts and assessments have been carried out, particularly out of 1,000 odd cities which are studied. So when valleys uh, 163 cities out of 1,000, when valleys are there by more than 200 meters lower to the reference level, so 163 cities rainfall is decreasing, precipitation anomaly is decreasing, and above 200 uh, urban precipitation anomaly is increasing. So these are some of the characteristics. One for the ballpark amount which I want to give, for 1 centimeter of rainfall received over 1 square kilometer area adds about 10 million liters of water. So you can see Delhi 14 almost 15,000 million liters of water will get added if 1 centimeter rainfall happens over Delhi. So similarly over India, if you see 31 million liters of water will get added with 1 centimeter of rainfall. So that's how rooftop water harvesting becomes very important to minimize the high quantums of rainfall received due to global warming and increase in high intensity of precipitation. And these are some of the areas urban water management is very important. Now, over India, you can see groundwater storage, terrestrial water storage is increasing, but except over Gangetic plains, this is another blessing of the global warming because of higher precipitation we are receiving. So we have many blessings on the other side, despite our mismanagement in several quarters. And we need to work on the coastal zone protection where higher population lives, and we have some urban planning guidelines, but we ignore urban hydrology in formulating those guidelines. This is a big mistake we have been doing, but no correction is happening despite disaster management guidelines for urban flooding released by National Disaster Management Authority mentions about it. No action at the municipality level has been there. So, and recently what NDMA has come out with modification to amendments to disaster management acts in 2024, where establishment of urban disaster management authorities is proposed. So we'll see, hope for only the improvement based on some decisions, and so much of eye-opening evidences are there, but still we have to work on. Long way to go for making better India, for better conditions for our increasing population. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for a very, candid, very candid, very comprehensive, and very lucid presentation. It was very detailed, covering every aspect, especially the fact that you have highlighted that with by 2050, 52% of our population is going to live in urban areas, and how public safety now the centerpiece would be health, which means tackling airborne and waterborne diseases, and the impact of short duration, high intensity rain precipitation and the problems caused by them, and the need for early warning systems to do ward level environment management, and how at present in the environmental performance index we rank one at 176 or 180 countries. So there is it's a long haul according to you, and so you we have to, especially with the policy analysts and the government ignoring urban hydrology. Sir, it was very a wide canvas which you covered, a lot of details. Thank you very much. And now I would like to introduce our uh, next speaker, Mr. Nityanand Jayaraman. Mr. Nityanand Jayaraman is a Chennai based writer and social activist and a member of the Chennai Solidarity Group, a collective that fights environmental injustice and discrimination. As competition for access to natural resources pits powerful corporations against farmers, fishers, and indigenous people in violent conflict, Mr. Nityanand locates himself on the side of the latter to ensure that rule of law and democracy are not buried at the altar of commerce. An engineer turned journalist and activist, Mr. Nityanand describes himself as a solidarity worker who generates city based support for community struggles against corporate crime and solidarity against government high handedness in dealing with such struggles. Relying on volunteer energy and local resources, Mr. Nityanand's group has played a critical role in expanding democratic spaces for community struggles, including the Campaign for Justice in Bhopal, the campaign against Unilever's mercury pollution in Kodaikanal, the fisherfolk struggle to save the Ennore wetlands in Chennai, and the protests by residents of Tuticorin against UK multinational Vedanta's polluting sterlite copper smelter. We are indeed fortunate to have with us Mr. Nityanand Jayaraman. We thank you, sir. Now the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Madhu Reddy, for your kind invitation and my introduction. I am honored to speak alongside Dr. KJ Ramesh, and very happy to have sat through his presentation. So thank you, sir. My presentation, my talk today will take a slightly different role, and not so much technical as it is political. Not so much data-centered, as I'm trying to also center equity, issues of equity, in considering the particular predicament that all of humanity, and particularly those of us in India, are facing. So the commonly it is said that the ecological crisis that we are currently confronting, or the crisis of ecology and equity, has been caused by humans. And while it is true, and it is not, because it is not as if all humans caused this problem. It is a small, elite, overconsumptive class of humans who have caused this. And we also need to remember that it is not as if all humans experience the effects of this crisis equally. There's the poor, the marginalized, and in places like India, people from the oppressed castes share or face a disproportionate burden, bear a disproportionate burden of the ill effects of environmental degradation and development. There are 4 points that I would like to emphasize through my presentation. The first I've already dealt with, which is the issue of equity and inequity. The second is that cities are inherently, as we see it now and as we are currently imagining it, represent an imperial mode of living, which means cities and urbanization is essentially a form of colonization. The third point that I'd like to make is, in our current vocabulary of development, urbanization and valorization of built spaces and built infrastructure is inherent. And this also has a certain impact on all the issues that Dr. Ramesh had highlighted. The fourth point and the final point that I'll be making is that cities and urbanization share the same underlying logic as that of the cancer cell, which is growth. Growth is the underlying logic of urbanization. I would end by requesting the audience to consider protest by marginalized communities not as aberrations, not as nuisance, not as a barrier to development, but as something that is extremely important to pay heed to, because there we will be hearing voices that are talking about ecology and equity. I would like to first start off with a short excerpt from an interview with Mr. Lado Sikaka, who's a Adivasi elder, a Dongriakon from Odisha, where a community of Dongriakons in Niyamgiri were fighting against a bauxite mine by Vedanta, which is the UK multinational, and eventually they prevailed. I would like to play this and then talk to you more about what this means. So through this presentation, Mr. Sikaka's point of view is divergent. It's very, very diametrically opposite to the popular worldview. And it's actually a civilizational conflict, because in Mr. Sikaka's worldview, it is not a matter of sustainable mining. It is not a matter of sharing the proceeds of mining with the community. It is about whether mining should happen or not. In his worldview, the bauxite remaining under the mountain is prosperity, as it means that the hill would be healthy, the rivers and streams that flow from that would be healthy, and that would be good for not just humans, but for generations to come of all life forms. In our worldview, the bauxite has to come out of the earth for development to happen. And so here we are seeing a civilizational conflict in which one voice does not really have a place. It is a marginalized voice, and their views are considered to be cultural constructs rather than knowledge or science. So let's keep this in the background. And just a little bit about myself. I belong to a collective called Vetiver Collective, and we lend solidarity to communities engaged in struggle against land degrading activities, which include environmental conservation and development. Our solidarity essentially is informed by three different principles and values. One, that it is humble, which means that our work tries to create spaces for communities to speak for themselves, does not occupy that to articulate on their behalf. It is slow, which means that we're not in a hurry. The change, particularly positive change, takes a long time. And deep solidarity, which means we try and bring in things that communities don't or can't do by themselves. We mobilize science of all kinds, not just the Western institutional science, but also other non-Western sciences. We mobilize arts, media, and law to lend solidarity to community struggles. Talking about the other point that I was mentioning. So cities, normally when we talk about cities and sustainable cities, we think about the city as something that is constrained within the municipal boundaries. But a city, as I already said, represents an imperial mode of living, which means it requires colonies. It requires colonies from which resources can be extracted. Delhi's water does not come from Delhi. Delhi's electricity, most of it does not come from Delhi. And Delhi's waste does not always end up in Delhi. It probably goes to Haryana or somewhere else. And that goes for virtually every city. So Martin Arboleda had very evocatively called a city an inverted mine, but we can just as well call it a mountain of garbage. Both would apply equally. So when we think about cities and we think about sustainable cities, we need to think beyond the actual municipal boundaries to the footprint of a city, which means when we talk about Singapore as a sustainable city, we need to wonder where Singapore gets its resources from and what the conditions of the environment and the people living in those areas are, or where does its garbage go to, and how is that handled? Because both at the points of extraction, points of production, and points of disposal, we have colonies. And those colonies are usually inhabited by people who are lower down in the pecking order, in communities that come from marginalized backgrounds. In the United States, it might be communities of color. In places like India, it would be minorities, and it would be people lower down in the caste hierarchy. So as I said, I mean, why are cities important? I think cities are important because they're consumptive. I mean, they are over-consumptive. They consume 75% of the world's resource. So if you want to address sustainability and equity, I think cities are a great place to start with because they represent the problem. But cities only cover about 2% of the Earth's surface. And this imperial mode of living, which is a colonial way of living, which celebrates or which kind of hides the fact that a city has extraterritorial access to sources of resources and to sinks where garbage can be dumped. This has been made possible by a Cartesian separation of nature and society, where nature is seen as a passive storehouse of resources, which can be either abused or managed well with the right kinds of policy. And Lado Sikaka's view, of course, differs entirely with this because nature is seen as integral to his society or his community. In terms of drivers of ecosystem collapse, we hear a lot about climate change, but we don't really hear much about land use change, which is one of the most important drivers, including of climate change. And land use change is essentially something that is that accompanies what we call development, and now increasingly what we call environmental conservation or climate mitigation also involves massive land use change, often to the disadvantage of local communities and local ecosystems. At the root of all these things, even state organizations, very sober organizations like the United Nations, have declared that the current limited paradigm of economic growth is at the heart of the problem. And there's really no getting around the fact that we need to be able to reimagine society, a post-growth society. It does not mean that we have to degrow. Perhaps some sections of society would, and other sections of society would need to make up for that and grow. I would like to take you to my city, which is Chennai, and it is a disaster city. Chennai's defining logic is water. Water is the element that defines the city, but unfortunately, the city is no longer designed around water as the defining element. Like all cities, land has all of a sudden taken over as the most important determinant of the urban. The city of Chennai faces a particularly difficult problem because when it rains, the corporation of Chennai gets very anxious because it will flood. And if it doesn't rain, Metro Water will get anxious because there will be no water for the next year. And the reason for that is in the topography of the city and what we have done to that and where it is located. The city of Chennai is on the east coast bordering the Bay of Bengal. It's a coastal plain, so it is reasonably flat. And when it is flat, generally water tends to flow off, except when it stays in the low-lying areas. All the areas identified in blue are irrigation tanks and other water bodies, none of which are actually natural. They're all constructed water bodies, constructed over centuries, because water does not stay for very long. It escapes through small streams that join larger rivers like the Kosastaliyar in the north, the Kuam in the center, and the Adyar in the south, and drains into the Bay of Bengal after having watered the entire land. So water has a tendency to first move down, which means water that touches open soil tends to move down. That's called percolation. And when the soil is saturated, it tends to flow over the surface, which is called a runoff, and then moves into small self-created streams and fills up low-lying areas, spills over the low-lying areas, and goes and meets larger drains or larger streams or larger rivers, and eventually ends up in the Bay of Bengal after having saturated the land, filled up the water bodies, and moving out. So it is in the dharma of water to soak the land, to refresh the aquifers, and to flow out and reach the Bay of Bengal. So blocking it is actually interfering with the dharma of that of water. Now, what we have in the name of development and urbanization is a city that has grown on its open spaces. It is not just that the water bodies have been encroached upon, but the catchments of the water bodies have also been urbanized. And when that happens, there is not enough room for the skies to speak to the open earth. Water that falls from the sky does not touch the soil. Instead, it falls on hard surfaces and gets converted into runoff. So which means for the same intensity of rain, Dr. Ramesh has talked about an increasing intensity. I'm saying even without climate change, Chennai is destined to drown because of the increase in hard surfaces, which means an increase in runoff, which will then overwhelm the drains and the surface water bodies and not adequately recharge the groundwater aquifers. In all this, there is a matter of value. It is not a matter of science. It is not a matter of technology. It is not something that IIT can solve, because the matter of value is a matter of politics, because different people value different things differently. We saw that from Lado Sikaka's interview. How he sees the Niyamgiri is very different from how Vedanta or the government of India or government of Odisha sees the Niyamgiri hills. One sees it as life itself, and the other sees it as a source of bauxite for 30 years. So in this battle of value and worth, we have a situation where built infrastructure is highly valued, private property is highly valued, and this comes with hidden liabilities. Unbuilt infrastructure like this, gorgeous hills of the Western Ghats, which have grasslands, and amidst the grasslands, in the folds of the grasslands, you have these unique forests called the submontane tropical evergreen forest called the Shola forest, which are rainwater factories that soak in the water that is brought in by all these grasslands around it and squeeze it out in the form of streams that then feed large rivers like the Kaveri. This unbuilt infrastructure does not have much importance in our points of view. So we tend to run transmission towers, railway lines, and open it up for tourism and all kinds of development rather than treat it as an extremely important shock absorber and a provider for all of us. This resource, unfortunately, is not private, and that's why we don't value it. It's a communal resource. Its benefits go to everybody, humans and non-humans alike. The assets of this infrastructure are hidden. Here's the city of Chennai. So in in Tamil, there's a word called Porambok. The word Porambok is actually a revenue category word. This word is also there in Telugu and in Kannada and in Malayalam. So all Dravidian languages share this word. The word Porambok essentially refers to communally owned spaces where resources are shared. This is an ancient agrarian revenue term. And these spaces could be water bodies, they could be woodlots, they could be cremation grounds, roads, and other public spaces that are used by everybody. These are also biodiversity refuges. Interestingly, in modern day Tamil, this word has degraded into a pejorative, which means useless, worthless spaces. It also is used to refer to worthless people. How this transformation happened is probably an interesting story, because it also coincides with the arrival of the British and their interest in private property and the difficulty that they had in dealing with the Porambok lands, which are communally owned. There are only two rules that govern the Porambok. They cannot be bought or sold. They cannot be built upon. In other words, for the purposes of capitalist development, these are useless. They are worthless. If it cannot be bought and sold, what's the fun in it? If you cannot build in it, why let it be there? So the whole process of converting this into property or into converting it into something that can be built upon has characterized our course of development, even after the British have left. So what you have on the left is a revenue map from 1970, which shows the Velachery Eri. Eri is an irrigation tank. This Eri, I don't exactly know the date, but it's likely to be about 400 or 500 years old. And Eris are Porambok. They're called Eri Porambok. And down gradient of the Eris, we usually have what is called a Meikal Porambok, which is a grazing commons. And the Eris are not meant to be built upon, so you cannot build on Eris or on other forms of Porambok. And here we have a situation where the Eri has been completely taken over for residential areas. In 2015, so the one on the right shows the boundaries of the Eri and how urbanization has taken over the water spread area of the Eri. In 2015, the entire area was underwater and people complained that they were flooded. Eris and water bodies don't flood, they fill up. So if you build a house inside an Eri, your house is likely to fill up during monsoons. It is nothing extraordinary that happened over there. The only thing that was extraordinary was the fact that you have a planning agency filled chock-a-block with people who have engineering degrees, who think it is okay to permit layouts inside water bodies and on the upgradient in the catchment, which will increase the runoff from that area. Here we have another Eri called Kodungayur Eri. The story is the same, but the point I want to make over here is different. It is often said that unplanned development leads to these kinds of problems. But what you see on the right-hand side is actually a square and a kind of a grid-like layout. So there's actually a planned layout. This layout was planned under what is called the Eri scheme. As I said, Eri means irrigation tank. And Eri scheme, this was funded by the World Bank. So it is not just Indian engineers, but we have white people coming over here to tell us that it is okay to build on land. And we have borrowed money to construct this planned layout inside a water body, also heavily flooded. So it is not the lack of planning, but planning itself and the manner in which it is planned, the fact that this planning is done by experts who have only one way of knowing, and there is no other consultative process that goes into this. So we are looking at a failure of democracy, a failure of inclusion of diverse voices and diverse ways of seeing and diverse ways of knowing that has led to this urban crisis. This is the Pallikarnai marshland, which is a very large 50 square kilometers of water spread and 250 square kilometers of catchment to the west. And this drains this 250 square kilometers of catchment, holds the water, and squeezes it out through the year through that small chicken neck canal to the north. In 2005, after a flood, the government of Tamil Nadu took out a portion of about 285 acres of the Pallikarnai marshland and handed it over to ELCOT to create a special economic zone where IT industries would be located. So this is called the knowledge corridor. So you have knowledgeable people constructing their knowledge factories inside a water body. And these knowledge factories also have LEED certification of green building certification. I mean, look at how ironic it is that we have green building certification for companies. These are big names in the business of IT who have green certification, platinum certification for water sensitive design, but they're located inside a water body. They claim to be rainwater harvesting compliant while building inside the city's largest rainwater harvesting infrastructure, which is the Pallikarnai marshland. So it is not a lack of expertise, but the kind of expertise that we have that might be the problem. So here we're looking again at the last point that I'm trying to make, which is what is growth? So here we have built up area as the main metric of growth. Built up area has increased from 47 square kilometers in 1980 to 402 square kilometers in 2010. No, not so much in terms of flooding in 1980, but by 2010, we're getting flooded almost every year when it rains. Wetland areas under wetlands have gone down, but it is not just the wetlands that matter, but also the catchment for the wetlands that matter, because the largest reservoir is not above ground, it is under the ground, and we need to see how water can reach the underground aquifers and not focus merely on surface water storage. We are constantly assailed by false solutions. And in fact, in my 30 years as an activist, I have been working alongside solution-impacted communities, communities that have been hurt, affected, impacted by what the mainstream defines as a solution. That solution might be a solution to the electricity problem in the form of a coal-fired power plant, or increasingly now, as we see it, in the form of large solar parks or wind farms. You can identify false solutions when if you hear an engineer speak, one must be alert, because they tend to be very solution-oriented and do not question the formulation of the problem. How to formulate the problem is a political issue. Who formulates the problem is a political issue. And so it is important to get your problem right, and then the solution will flow. So when you have a very complex problem and somebody comes with a very simple solution, problem is climate change and the solution is wind and solar. Now, doesn't sound right, because you cannot power an inherently unsustainable and inherently unjust and inequitable economy just using renewable sources. You need something more, something different. The second way in which you identify a false solution is to find out who gains and at whose cost. Usually these false solutions come at the cost of hidden communities, and the cost itself is hidden. We will not see the impacts. Just as we have clean streets doesn't mean that we are a clean city. Clean streets mean our garbage goes to some unsuspecting community outside. It is said that we can't have an omelette without breaking the egg. The question is whose egg and who gets to eat the omelette. The third way in which you can identify a false solution is it allows us, the elite of the country, to go about our lives without any disturbance. Our lives require disturbance. The status quo requires disturbance. And so that is something that, again, requires to be seen. When I say disturbance, I'm not saying that, no, there has to be revenge. I'm saying that then the status quo needs to be disturbed in such a manner that we are able to bring in an equity into our society. Otherwise, we will constantly be hiding our problems, which will come back to bite us in the form of floods, bad air quality, and water scarcity. And finally, the way to identify a false solution is if a complex political, social problem is sought to be fixed by a technology. Techno fixes that replace local, democratic, and wise interventions that might otherwise lead us to a more sustainable solution. I will just end with a few slides on the promise of the solar and how that is being really subverted and perverted by the manner in which we're constantly even taking a potentially equitable source of electricity, of energy, not electricity, of energy, because solar energy falls everywhere, not equally, but falls everywhere. And one of the most important harnessers of solar energy are the green plants, plants with chlorophyll. Because now when I say plants, people can only think about power plants. I'm talking about the real plants. These are the only ones that can convert solar energy into usable energy. They convert it into starch, which goes into our bodies and gives us the energy to do good things and bad. So here we have a story from Ramanathapuram, which is a southern district. It's an arid land, but it does get a significant amount of rain, more than 700 millimeters of rain, which ancient wisdom has allowed us to harness by constructing these kammais. Kammais are like Aries in northern Tamil Nadu, they call it Aries. In the southern Tamil Nadu, they call kammais. And these kammais are also constructed irrigation tanks that have a very large catchment and a much larger ayakat as well, a place which is irrigation, areas under irrigation for a kammai. So here we have photographs of two Google Earth images of two kammais in Ramanathapuram. On the left-hand side, what you see like a garland is the embankment of the kammai which has been constructed, and the water tends to stay upgrade into fit and water the rest of the irrigated area through the year. So they have at least two crops as a result of the irrigation, one during the rains and one immediately after the rains. So this is actually what you're seeing on the left is actually an entire energy cycle where rainwater and sun are working with land to create energy in the form of plants, in the form of water, which sustains life, but also sustains a very productive agricultural economy and an animal husbandry. So this area is famed for its goat rearing. Most of it is on Porombo Commons and on private lands because the goat droppings are used as fertilizer. So farmers actually invite goat herders to bring their goats to this area. The goat economy is largely women-led and is a cash economy. So it's a very important part of the economy. That has been disrupted because how we value this kammai has shifted. And this land has been given over to Adani for the state's largest solar park, which is 648 megawatts for the Kamudi Adani Green Energy's solar plant. So a question I'm asking is, can a city grow without harming itself or others? If it cannot, then I think we need to revisit both the concept of the city and the concept of growth. And if we keep equity at the center, which means, can we do this without harming itself? Can we do it without harming others? And in others, I'm talking about people not like us, people who are coming from marginalized backgrounds, whose lives are invisible to us, or other non-human life forms, and the future generations of humans and non-human life forms. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nityanand. Raman, thank you so much for this evocative and compelling presentation, talk, which is forcing us to rethink on what we hold as normal. And it underscores the importance of the irony that we are witnessing. That on the one hand, we have the cities which occupy 2% of the Earth's surface consuming 75% of the resources. On the other hand, we are saddled with a lot of false solutions. And it's a long haul, and disturbing or disrupting this normal requires persuasion at a very, very large scale. I think, but we need people like you. May your tribe increase. We have to underscore the importance of rethinking, and also the issue about how you said who will formulate the problem and what is the problem and who will tell us the problem is a very, very important thing to always keep in our minds when we are looking for solutions. Thank you, sir. Now, I would want to advise our participants. We have very little time for our uh, question and answer session. We have some questions and answers. So I'll request our honorable speakers to be brief. Mr. Nityanand Jayaraman would like to leave by before quarter to one. So I will pause and we will quickly go through these questions which are there. The first question is what is temperature inversion? Why is the air quality worse in winter? Probably Dr. Ramesh can handle it. Uh, Jayaraman sir, could you remove the music?
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry. Temperature normally decreases from ground to the overlying atmosphere at a rate of about 6.2 degrees per kilometer in the vertical from ground to above. So when instead of that is the normal condition. When instead of decrease in temperature, if increase in temperature takes place, that's how it is called temperature inversion. It is usually seen in winters, particularly over North India. And that's how, because of the ground frost and minimum temperature reaching in the early morning.
Then the other question is how far has the smart cities mission improved matters? It has been reported that urban flooding isn't addressed by this mission at all.
It is not included because hydrology is not considered as a part of
You
guideline.
mentioned this.
And we only worked focused on improving simple things like buses and some transportation, widening of the roads and some bridges, somewhere pedestrian bridges for people with lifts, etc. All these cosmetic things only we have done, not addressing holistically the sewage deficiency, stormwater drainage, and sewage expanding the sewage and drainage capacity of the cities. We have not touched. Even in Bombay is the biggest example for that. After 2005, despite spending so much money year after year, waterlogging in the city has not reduced.
I will club two questions for Mr. Nityanand Jayaraman. One is that if development and better opportunities of education, employment, health, etc., drive people to urban areas, exposing them to disasters like pollution, etc., will replicating such development in rural areas help us really? And a connected question is from what you had presented 2% land areas consuming 75% of world's resources. Is unbuilding cities possible? Isn't the outlook bleak? You may like to respond, Mr.
Thank you very much for those questions. First, the rural outmigration is essentially a result of policy. And so if policy is changed, the outmigration from rural areas can also be reversed. Now, the second question is, are we going to be replicating our cities in rural areas? Are we talking about decentralized urbanization? I think that would be a problem because cities, as we define it, are problematic. So perhaps we can have a rethought out city. A city that does not hurt itself and does not hurt others could be a basic principle. So in defining a living space and a space for our economy. So what needs to be done in the other places would need to be defined by the guiding values of not hurting and being able to have a future that is healthy. In terms of whether it is bleak, yes, it is a very challenging problem. Whether it is possible, whether we will do it or not, is something that only astrologers can speak about. I believe that if we don't try, we will not get there. And if we try and only try to address the easy problems, the problems that have what we consider likely solutions, possible solutions, then there is no fun in it. I think the problems need to be complex. They need to be seen in all its complexity. They need to bring in the likes of Dr. Ramesh, but also the likes of the people who are fighting against problematic development, against problematic environmental mitigation problems. So in Chennai, if you look at what the government is doing and what the fishers in Ennore are doing to protect the wetlands, it is in loggerheads. The people of Ennore, the fishermen of Ennore, or the fisher folk of Ennore are the ones who are trying to protect the city's kidneys. They're the ones who are trying to protect the wetlands, not just for themselves, but for the rest of the city. And the government is desperately trying to occupy it in the name of development. So I think that there needs to be a collaboration and a mutual respect to understand the fisher's knowledge of the wetlands, because that, I think, brings in a very beautiful and important component that is left out in the kinds of stuff that we are taught in engineering colleges.
So the next question is about large-scale watershed management. Can large-scale water management projects like formation of artificial lakes and linking of rivers mitigate extreme weather events, specifically by increasing evaporative cooling inland during summer months? Dr. Ramesh.
No, that is not possible. In river linking is a huge expenditure involved. For that, whatever project reports are there developed by National Water Development Agency, they have assumed excess availability of water in certain catchments 10-15 years before. That is not true because of additional storage infrastructure is built. The minor and medium scale dams and check dams and percolation tank check dams indiscriminately built everywhere has not been taken into consideration in terms of extra water availability. So that is the reason why river linking is not possible. What is possible is restore the encroached water bodies within the urban areas and see that their paleo inflow channels to those earlier local tanks are restored, and so that rainwater in a natural gravitational mode reaches those city urban area tanks, so that urban flooding can be minimized. Urban flooding cannot be minimized without addressing the encroachments surrounding the Valacheri Lake, which our distinguished colleague has mentioned. So we have to find out a trajectory for the rainwater to flow into its own local tank, which that's how the cities are built. So that has to be restored. That is the only way of doing. And another thing is recharging the groundwater, because consumption has increased. So rooftop harvesting, putting the water down below the multi-story building through a percolation tank is the solution to additionally avoiding the waterlogging and runoff from the extreme rainfall.
Would you like to add, Mr. Jayaraman? So the next question is
I would.
yeah. So the next question is wealth disparity is increasing geometrically in India. The victim castes are too swayed by state-sponsored and media-managed religious perverse polemics to identify the disaster descending on them. If the victims themselves strengthen the perpetrators to vanquish them, how really the tribal leader uh, can succeed? How can we benefit by the experience in our own struggle for justice in urban setting?
I think that, again, one cannot look at sections of society as homogeneous, just as the non-victim or the society of perpetrators, which includes my tribe, is not homogeneous. There are people who see the problem, and there are those who do not see it as a problem. Similarly, even among, say, the indigenous communities or the community in Ennore among the fishers, there are different points of view, and some people are swayed and some people are not. The ones that are not try to fight, but they're fighting against tremendous odds. And that fight can only be strengthened if there is the solidarity for them or for that struggle from other sections of society. So one of the things that we do is to get people to put their privilege to work. And so solidarity becomes a very important component in deciding the success of a struggle. So if you look at the Niyamgiri struggle, which was a very big struggle, it was rooted, anchored by the worldview of the local community of Dongriya Kons, but it drew in national global solidarity in order to defeat a global multinational. So eventually they prevailed, but these successes tend to be short-lived because another attempt will now be made to take out the bauxite from there. Another struggle will be launched and another round of solidarity mobilization will have to happen. So I think that people need to talk to each other. The solidarity needs to be between communities. It needs to be between different ways of seeing and knowing, which means different sciences should be speaking to each other as well.
This question about are our neighbors and other global nations, are they responsible for our situation? And a related question is, what is the solution for crop burning? Dr. Ramesh?
See, naturally, wind brings whatever biomass burning takes place upstream in the winter. So, biomass burning is over and above this crop residue burning is over and above the biomass burning happens at the household, right from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and in many parts of India, rural households. So despite gas availability, that is unaffordability of gas, everyone knows about it, and that's how the biomass burning continues. So about the stubble burning, wind naturally brings it towards Delhi. So that is the natural phenomena. You just cannot stop it unless you avoid biomass burning at the household level. So that attempts are made, but they are not successful yet. But on the crop burning, solutions are available. We are not working on those solutions. We are only working at the regulatory level. For example, crop residue machinery is given as a subsidy by the central government for several years, 5, 6 years, to Punjab government and Haryana government. But to access that machinery, individual farmer has to book online or an app and schedule its access to him and bring it himself by paying some 1500 2000 as a guarantee to the machinery lending, and bring it on his field, buy diesel and hire the operator, and then go for crop residue management on his field. So that adds minimum of 2000 rupees extra for a marginal farmer of 2 acres. That should not be the case. We, on the one side, we talk about diesel subsidy to the farmer. Why not diesel provided freely to the farmers of up to 5 acre hand holding? And then there is enough machinery. Punjab government puts 800 government officials to monitor the stubble burning and report it, file FIRs against them. Instead of that, why can't they schedule the delivery of machinery at the farm level to the farmer by taking the village level harvesting schedule and making the machinery available at his farm hold? Operator costs and the diesel costs required for it have to be borne by the government subsidy. Then stubble burning can be avoided in one go. But solutions are there, like our Nityanand ji mentioned. We go for solutions which are not unsustainable and ill-formed solutions. That's all. Solutions are available, but we are not working on making them accessible to the people. Instead, we ask people to go and register a book and pay deposit and bring it.
This is also a question from Mr. Vikram Simha. Use of battery buses, will it reduce pollution? Because manufacturing batteries, would that not cause pollution again?
See, we will have the problem of management of the disposal of the batteries sometime later. Just like electronic waste, you will have piles of battery waste to be managed. We are not able to manage the electronic waste already, and how we will have, without that scrap management of battery waste and electronic waste added to the automobile waste. After 10 years, diesel cars have to be scrapped and all that. And on one side, when you say that vehicles got to be scrapped after 10 years diesel, 15 years petrol, now we are adding 18% GST on the scrapping also. So this is a very, very unfavorable and unexpected and unacceptable steps taken by the government. I'm sorry to say this.
Would you like to add, Jayaraman, on this? I think you muted. Okay. There was
No, I think he's been very clear, and I have nothing to add. The only thing is, like, again, I would, highlight the fact that a city is both a planetary mine and a garbage dump. And Dr. Ramesh has highlighted the dump part of it, because there's a problem with the disposal of the batteries, which will fall heavily on, right now, in the absence of a proper management system, despite the availability of laws. The batteries are scrapped and the lead is taken out from at a very, very primitive manner, with the cost being borne by those people. But there's also the issue of, where does this lead come from? Where does the plastic come from? What are the impacts there? So that's, again, something that needs to be considered.
So there was this other question by Mr. Rao on what can be done about the high intensity rainfall flooding Chennai and Bangalore, which we'll skip. I think it's been covered. So I'll come to the last question, and that I would request both the responses of both the speakers. Should we stop making the argument that we should get a free pass with respect to climate controls because we have a large population to cater for? Dr. Ramesh first. And
Free?
should we stop making the argument that we should get a free pass with respect to climate control because we have a large population to cater for? That is, on the climate change restrictions globally being discussed, should we get an exemption?
No. Those restrictions are not putting any burden on us, because at the moment we have only committed is to reduce the emission intensity of our greenhouse gases that we are complying with. What we are missing is global commitments are not putting any constraints on us. It is all our own climate action deficit in reducing the local impacts at the urban level, impacts at the local level for water resource, agriculture, public health, and existing increased vulnerability and risk. We have to address that. Those adaptation strategies and risk management strategies we have to work out. We are falling short heavily on that climate action. So climate action deficit is the first thing governments have to address, apart from worrying about the global emission reduction commitments and carbon zero by 2075, or we are not going to see that particular stage anyway. Carbon neutrality is not going to be the reality of the case, but we should work on minimizing the impacts by resilient and adaptation strategies.
Uh,
Yeah, so I think that the argument that we should be making is, because we have a large population, because of the state in which we are, we need to take climate action seriously, and we need to do more, as Dr. Ramesh has said. But also, one of the things that in doing so, we need to be very careful that the climate mitigation action does not fall heavily on the poor and the disadvantaged that are there already. And we are seeing a lot of this in the form of RED, which is like, having carbon sinks reserved, where the forests are then kept out of, or are taken out of, are made inaccessible by local communities. So you have these kinds of enclaves, or what we saw in terms of the solar power plant as a solution. These solutions are hugely problematic. So I think that your mitigation actions, again, need to be informed very strongly by concerns about equity. And second, we need to be looking at questioning growth. I mean, in the last 30 years, we are now celebrating the large number of billionaires we have. I think that should be a matter of shame to have such a large number of billionaires in a country that have so much poor. What we should be celebrating instead is when the number of absolute poor reduces drastically or gets completely eliminated, and people have a decent standard of living. Accumulation of wealth cannot be celebrated. So I would say, rather than look at this whole climate change or climate action as whether we are doing enough to reduce carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we need to be able to look at whether we can bring down the levels of prosperity at the top level. We cannot have vulgar levels of consumption like what we saw in a recent wedding, and the kinds of absolute abysmal poverty that we are witnessing on our streets. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration in designing our action, not just on climate, but also on development. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ramesh and Mr. Nityanand Jayaraman. We've had a very, very comprehensive discussion covering all aspects of the. I mean, it's too vast a subject to be encapsulated in a discussion lasting an hour and two or an hour and a half or two. But still, the kind of presentation, the kind of expositions that were made by both of us, bringing the entire thing into perspective and helping us think and question what is being doled out as a solution or as a normal. Thank you so much for the understanding. I would like to thank all the participants for being here, for tuning in, asking the questions, and my own team of the Anekdhara, especially Pratyush for stepping in and doing the technical job so in so fine a manner without any glitch. Thank you so much. Our next presentation, I mean webinar, will be on the last Sunday of January. We'll post the topic very soon.
Thank you. Bye for now.
So
Bye bye.